So we are going to be sculpting a skull. You can see I have my reference over here in the top right corner of the screen. I'm just going to be using that. A front and side view is totally fine. I normally only work with one image anyway, so having two is like amazing. And we are going to be talking about anatomy in this video, specifically level 4 of anatomy. So in the main levels of studying anatomy, you start with proportions, then you move on to the planes of the body, then you move on to muscles and starting to understand more about what's going on underneath the surface. And then level 4, you start filling in the gaps in your knowledge. I've sculpted a lot of heads in my day, but I still have gaps in my knowledge, and I'm not afraid to admit that, especially when it comes to something that I've sculpted hundreds of times or thousands of times. I have no idea how many heads and faces I've sculpted. So we're going to be creating a skull. It's not going to be super realistic. We're going to be focusing on those kind of 3 main areas, focusing on proportions, planes, and a little bit more about what's going on underneath the surface. But because it's just kind of bone and skeleton, we're not going to be doing muscles or anything like that. All right, let's get into it and start with the basic shapes here. So the backside of the skull, if you look over here, it's pretty much a sphere. It's a little elongated. It's a little, stretched toward the back. So it's not perfectly round or spherical, but we'll get in now and start creating the front plane of the face. So I like to split up the skull into 2 major sections to start. This back side, this spherical section, and then this front section, which is kind of like a wedge. And if you guys saw my last demo, it's on my YouTube channel if you haven't seen it, where I'm talking about how I go about blocking out a face. That'll be really helpful for you in terms of understanding this process even more, if you'd like to dive into that. So this is kind of what I start thinking about when I'm working on a head. And I like to keep things separated, split up into different sections, but you absolutely do not need to. You can work however you want. Once I start doing that, I start kind of getting in more information, specifically in terms of plane changes. So there are a few different plane changes that I like to look for. And I'm just going to go ahead and combine these for ease of use and Dynamesh them. Dynamesh is just a quick tool. You can see that I had 2 separate pieces there and just really quickly combined them. And it's going to let me dynamically update my geometry. You can see how it redistributed that there. So that's a nice little tool that I'm going to be using as I move forward. So let's just start by marking up our surface. I'm just going to carve in really simplistic shapes. So something roughly where the eyes will go, something roughly where the nose will go, something roughly where the mouth will go. And then we're going to start working on refining some of that. Another thing you're going to notice about the skull is that the hinge of the jaw is separated from this piece. We'll split that off and separate it later on, but let's just start by keeping things connected here in the beginning, and then we'll get in and start working on that. All right, so let's just start. We've got these basic kind of landmarks picked out, and now we can just start pushing and pulling some things around. I'm just using my move brush here, looking up at our reference image, noticing as much as I can. And when I'm doing a little study like this, I kind of like to remove any what I feel like is a preconceived notion that I might have. If I, have made something a million times one way, I might like to try doing it a different way this time, just to see what happens. If it ends up failing, that's okay. At least I tried something new. It's better than doing it the same way a million times and not making any progress. So I might try something a little new here as I continue to play around with some shapes. What's going on, Nap? Welcome. Face. Hello, hello. Is it possible if someone uses ZBrush for rendering without to bother yourself going to different softwares? So is it possible to render in ZBrush and not other softwares? It absolutely is, yeah. An artist that comes to mind, Raphael Grassetti. I'm sure a lot of you know him. Really fantastic artist. To my knowledge, he renders almost everything in ZBrush. He does a lot of different render passes, and then he composites his stuff in Photoshop. So, it's definitely possible. I think that there are a lot better tools for rendering personally, but that is you know, totally up to you. If ZBrush is like the one software you have and you don't want to bother going to something else or learning something else, it's definitely possible. I personally use Blender for rendering myself. I find the Cycles engine to be quite nice. It's not, you know, the best in the world based on a lot of opinions, including mine, but it is absolutely just fine, you know, for my purposes at least. So, and I would say that's true for really any tool. You know, you can use whatever you like, but, you know, I like to use the best tool for the job if I can. And obviously, everybody's going to have opinions and having their own biases, but, you know, I believe like ZBrush is the best tool for the job when it comes to sculpting. So I'm going to use ZBrush for sculpting. Now, is that actually true? I think so, yeah. I think by quite a wide margin, yeah. Will it always be true? I doubt it. I really highly doubt it. There's always new technology coming around. All right, so we got some cool shapes starting to form up. And you'll also notice I'm not in a huge hurry with this. Things are getting stretched. Just taking my time with it. Not trying to rush. I'm just trying to observe and take my time. You know, I'll jump around a lot. I'll come back to these eyes. I'll move around to the nose, start working on that mouth and separating that jaw here in a little bit. And just keep moving forward. In terms of brushes, not really using anything fancy. Right now I'm just using the Move brush, my custom clay brush, and a little bit of trim. That's about it. I was also using my custom Sharp Soft brush here, which is just kind of like a Dam Standard or Damien Standard brush, but it's a little softer, a little more gentle. Damien Standard brush is pretty sharp. But using any kind of that, you know, that style of brush is really helpful for just getting in, carving into your surface. There's that basic shape. Let's go ahead and separate that jaw now. So I think I've talked about that idea enough. Now we can actually do it. So there's our top section, right? I'll turn on double so we can see up inside of there. And now I'll just split that off. And all of those functions are down here in the split menu. I have a custom pop-up menu that I'm using. That's where you can find that stuff. And I'm not going to get in here and sculpt individual teeth probably. More so just focus on this basic shape. Let's turn off the lower jaw for a minute. Now, the teeth, if you notice here, really important part about this is how much curvature there is. The teeth are pretty much a cylinder. If you've ever heard me talk about sculpting the barrel of the mouth is created by the teeth. Your forms on the front of your face or on your surface of your body are created by what's going on underneath the surface. So understanding that information is very pertinent to creating an accurate form. Not to say that you can't create accurate forms without understanding that information, but obviously understanding that is going to be a lot more helpful for creating those shapes. All right. So we're starting to get that barrel of the teeth there, looking pretty good. Corn Father, welcome. Fantastic name, love it. Father of the corn, related to the children of the corn. All right, there's our lower jaw. Got a little nastiness going on there. I'll just delete that real quick. Fill in our holes, beautiful. Fill in our holes, only something you can say while 3D modeling without it being weird. It's probably still weird. All right, let's pull down here. Start shaping up that jaw. And that jaw comes back real far. We can see how far that comes back. And notice this part jutting out here, and then it transitions into the teeth. We're gonna add like probably just like a little cut here, something like this to separate that. Something really simple. And all I'm going to do is create a plane change to make sure that we're representing the teeth down here into the chin. Now, one thing I haven't really talked about while working on this yet are the proportions. And that is like the kind of step one of this, but I kind of blasted past it pretty quick. Mainly what we're looking for, if we divide the head in half, the eyes, depending on the person, can roughly fall right in the middle. So I can move my eyes down a little. Looking at this, it looks like the eyes are actually pretty high on the head. So I'm not too worried about it. Those kinds of things are meant to be rules of thumb, less so than hard and fast. You know, everyone follows these rules. If you look at a group of 10 people, picked at random, you know, there's going to be a ton of variety between all those people, especially in something as simple as where their eyes land on their head. The great mighty, what is it? Conquer. Oh, Conquer's Bad Fur Day. Yes. Never played it, but it's supposed to be good. Made by Rare, if I'm not mistaken, the same people who did Banjo-Kazooie. Rare Ltd. The greatest dev team of the late 90s, early 2000s. So we transition below the nose down into the teeth. We pull up. We got a little notch here in the cheekbone. And let's take a look at probably making this a little less thick. You can see there's actually a gap back here. I'm not going to worry about, you know, hollowing out this area. I'm not trying to create a super accurate skull here. More so to just capture those surface forms. My main concern is making sure that this distance isn't too great. So I think I just need to reduce that a little. I'll just pull in on that. And then stay tuned because we are going to be doing a hand after this, and then I'm going to be talking about how you can go through the process of creating some super clean geometry. So if you've seen any of my stuff and you're like, how does he get such clean forms? How does he create, like, why can't I do that? Well, I'm going to teach you how. It's not as hard as it looks. You just got to know what you're doing. That's kind of a lie. It is not easy to get super clean shapes, but I'm going to show you a process to make it a lot easier for you. No need to fight your geometry, at the very least. Make your tools work for you. All right. Now, the teeth tend to be a little longer here in the front and then shorter towards the back as well. That's something I'm noticing. So as that wraps around, it gets a little more short, and looks like the front teeth are pretty similar. So it kind of gives it the illusion that it is smiling or grinning because of the difference in the length of teeth. That's really interesting. I've never thought about that before. Now, that's why we do these things. To study and learn more. Find where these gaps in our knowledge are. All right, let's come back up to the nose and start playing with that shape a little more. Especially from the side view, I'd like to pull out a little more here. And pull back some. Give a little more depth for us. You like how I work high poly, but it still looks creamy and smooth, not lumpy. It takes skill. It does take skill. One thing that's really great about recording yourself working, sculpting, drawing, whatever, is you kind of get like a highlight, or not a highlight reel, what would it be called? Like a review of your own work, and you get to see your own growth in a really nice way. So what's great is I've been sculpting on YouTube for a long time, so I can go back and look at old videos and see my process and how I might have done something, 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, and I can see exactly like just massive improvements in terms of things like speed or just like mindset and workflow, where working on something like this, this might have taken me an hour or more to do something like this, and we've done it here in just a few minutes. We've gotten the basic shape and proportions down. I really do enjoy that part of recording and creating content online. So if you are like looking for a way to grow faster as an artist, I highly recommend recording yourself. It's a really great way to get an objective view of your process, and it's really helpful for in the future if you ever feel stuck or feel like you're not improving. You're improving. You're getting better. It's just not always so easy to see. So just go take a look at some of those videos, and you'll get a really good idea of how quickly you actually are improving. All right, so this edge here, it's making the mouth feel really awkward. Whenever you're sculpting anything facially related, it's really easy for you to bake in an expression. And when you do that, it can create a little bit of an awkward feeling in a few different areas. And then you end up with something that almost looks goofy, or it's a little hard to describe. It'll look like your brain gets stuck on a thing, like the way it looks, and you're like, oh, why is it wrong? And it's like, well, maybe you just need to get rid of the expression. You just need to clean that up a little. And a skull kind of naturally looks, like I said, kind of like it's smiling, like it's grinning. So some of it's unavoidable. This little notch here, this is the your ear canal, your auditory meatus. I'll try to get that in there a little bit too. Like a little. This is the sternal notch, if I'm not mistaken. There's clavicular sternal notch. Maybe the clavicular sternal notch is down here. It's like skull sternal. I don't remember what it's called. Doesn't matter. But this is where your big neck muscle connects onto your sternocleidomastoid. Everybody's favorite muscle. The invisible skill of sculpting, yeah. Yeah, speed is definitely one of those things where it just comes with time, you know? There's a ton of better sculptors out there than me that when I watch them or see any of their work, when they're like actually sculpting, I'm like, dang, you are so fast. How are you so fast? And it's just experience. Yeah, it's just time. You sculpt more, you get more confident. You make decisions faster because you know exactly what you want, exactly what you're doing. You know where things go. And you don't have to fiddle with it and try to, like, oh, is that right? Oh, no, I need to adjust this. You just get it exactly where you need it. like right now, this little ear hole back here is being annoying. This part's not super important though to me. Just play with that. That's probably fine. Now the skull gets much wider as it goes back on average. Not true for everybody. There's also a few planes of the skull, like general plane changes that I'd like to put in a little harder, just in a few areas, and then I'll knock them back. The skull, it really depends on the person. There's a lot of different shapes that you can see with skulls, depending on age and ethnicity. You can see a skull that, you know, gets a lot wider as it goes back, a lot taller. It's kind of what we got. It's pretty boxy here with this one though, actually. And then we need to take a step back every now and again and kind of refresh our eyes. So let's give that a quick remesh here. Give that a quick second to calculate, and that'll just clean up our geometry. I haven't done this yet, but this will essentially take everything that I've sculpted. So I had 500,000 polys there, and we just converted that down into 10,000 polygons. So even with doing that, we're still capturing all the forms that I had sculpted, but we've gotten rid of all the unnecessary noise. Not that there was like a ton of noise. In some ways you might want that with something like this, because you know, you're sculpting bone, so there's like some texture that you might want. But what I prefer here, especially during this stage, is to just really focus on capturing big shapes. And we can always add texture in later. So I'm gonna blend out this area here for the teeth, coming down into the chin. Maybe make that a little more pointed. Trim and plane out the bottom. Now there is normally a gap here, so I'm not gonna carve in all the way. I'm just gonna carve in a little to represent that gap. So just right through here. I'll just push that in. Just so that there's enough of a dip there. So this is not, we can't really see it here from this angle, but if we look at the front, if you see this little gap right here, it's because the jaw is kind of shaped like a boomerang, or not like a boomerang, like a horseshoe from this view. So you get that horseshoe shape, right? Or that U shape. And then this is gone, not here. But I don't want to create a really thin piece of geometry, because not that it's anatomically incorrect, but I don't want to create that because it's a little frustrating to work with sculpturally here in ZBrush. The ZBrush tools do not like super thin pieces of geometry. No software does. That's why when talking about clothes, somebody was asking about clothes recently if I would do a tutorial on that. I have a few over on my Gumroad, but one of my main tips when working on clothes is to create not thickness, but the illusion of thickness. And if you don't know how to do that, you can learn about it in one of my tutorials. I cover it in all of them. But I do that with a lot of my stuff, where I'm not actually sculpting or creating the thing, but I'm creating the illusion of the thing. Like, a lot of people probably don't realize or think about that a lot with like things like hair, right? I sculpt almost all my hair, and when I take away all the stray flyaways and the smaller or medium pieces, and it's just like one big chunk, it kind of looks like a big piece of plastic. Like, it feels awkward. But not until you have all those like secondary and tertiary pieces does it really start feeling more alive. Oh, we need to square out that jaw, huh? Let's pull that out more. Give it a more wide angle. Hey, there we go. Straight down. And actually, a little curved in too. I'll exaggerate that. Very nice. All right, my cheekbones are exaggerated quite a lot here as well. So I'll play with pushing that back in. Let's see. What else kind of sticks out to us at this stage? There's definitely some changes I need to make here to the eyes and nose and front section of the face. Looking right around here, this area. So I'm going to come through here and start to clean up some of that. And I'm going to change this song. That was very annoying. Kind of droning on and on. All right, I think that's starting to feel a lot better. I was noticing kind of how angled that was from the side. So a lot of people have asked me about perspective lately and what I do when I am sculpting. During the early stage of block out, I don't like to use perspective really at all. I think it kind of gets in the way. But after a while, you probably will want to turn on perspective. I just use the default value of 50. That's like a 50 millimeter camera lens. For like something like a portrait, you'd use somewhere around 100, 120, right around there typically. So if you want to get that to a longer lens, you can play with that. 50 is just strong enough to cause like some distortion for me to where it's noticeable and I can get in and play with it a little more and refresh my eyes. So I like to swap back and forth as often as possible once I get a little more into things. All right, I'm gonna make sure that I have enough of a forehead here as well. I don't want it to curve back too fast. You know, right now, kind of dissipates rather quickly. And we need a little more of some kind of protuberance there. All right. My area around my eyes is feeling pretty thick as well, so I'll go through and or narrow that area out. Whoops. Symmetry causing me some errors. And for this, I'm just using the mask lasso. So I like to use masks to just control or get finer control over what I'm sculpting. Without them, it can be, a little bit of a mess to move things around with your brush. But with it, it makes things quite a bit easier. And this is transitioning pretty awkwardly. So let's fix that up. And we'll start to go through and clean up some shapes here and there, but for the most part, I want to take my time with refining what I already have. So, in terms of secondary shapes, little differences here and there. We can start putting in a little bit of that information. Everything that I've created up to this point, for the most part, is a primary shape. There are some little secondary things here and there, but we're nowhere near a stage where we want to start worrying about details. And we probably won't get too into details here with this today, but we'll do a little bit. Because who doesn't love details? I like seeing all these little ridges on bones. There's a little one here. Just finding all these new things that I, don't think about too often or learned about a long time ago that don't necessarily matter a ton when you're sculpting a face because they don't affect the surface in a huge way, but it's just fun getting in here doing a study like this. I love doing this kind of stuff. feel like every time I sculpt anything, I feel like I'm always learning something new. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, like when you're in the middle of a project, but I think if you look back, there's little things that you pull from every little project. It's hard to have that perspective though in the moment.
Took that motherfucker to the side when you pull up. Double me, you know I hit the tide when you know what. Man, mission, lie to me, cause my bitches hit the switch. Pull up.
And then there are some like little cracks and different things in the skull as well that we're mostly going to ignore here. To get a nice, quick bone texture as well, a really nice technique that I like to use is a trim brush, or even a planer brush will work fine. And just kind of quickly scraping that over your surface, you can get kind of like this rough, dimpled-like texture. And it's super quick and easy to do. You can also hold the Alt key to add surface, or add form to your surface. And then kind of go back and forth on those two. And you gotta be careful not to get like too spray strokey with it, because it can look really repetitive if you're not careful. I do not have a shoulder or back problem using such a big screen. In fact, I have the opposite. I specifically bought this tablet a number of years ago for that very reason. I had a much smaller tablet, and that was giving me a lot of neck issues. So I bought my 24/7? I forget. I'd have to break out a tape measure. I think it's the 24-inch Cintiq. They don't make this one anymore. They have a new one. But I bought this Cintiq specifically to alleviate the back problems and the hunching that I was constantly doing. And I think the only thing that you got to get used to with something like this is probably the arm movement, because you constantly have your arm up, not really resting on anything a ton. And that can be really tiring at first, but you get used to it pretty quick. But yes, definitely the opposite. That's exactly why I bought the big one. So I can mostly look straight ahead. Before you know, I'm like hunched up in a little ball like that. Not very fun.
Pardon me, Dr. Patterson, but your flatulence has no odor. At what point in history did a doctor become more than a trusted and learned friend who visited and treated the ill?
This is also why I love studies like this. They're so chill. You don't have to, be in a rush, be in a race. You can just hang out. This is something you can definitely do with other people too. I think it's actually more fun to do with other people. So then you can compare and kind of talk about what you learned, what you discovered along the way. If you learned anything new, or maybe feel like you didn't. It's definitely important to have a community of other artists. Some fun stuff going on here with the tip of the chin, where it's like kind of pulling in here. It's not something really I've ever noticed before. Doesn't look like it's too exaggerated either. It's like that edge wrapping around and kind of flowing up and in. I'm obviously exaggerating that a ton there, but it's like the basic idea at least. All right, we're in a pretty good spot here with our skull. in terms of big shapes, and we're working on secondary forms, starting to make some progress there. Pretty happy with the direction. And now it's more of just how much do we want to push on this. And you'll see me swapping back to Dynamesh here for a moment. That's also another thing I get asked about a lot. Like, when do you switch from Dynamesh to ZRemesher? And I'm like, that's the fun part. You don't. You just jump back and forth, depending on which one you need. Or Sculptress Pro. Sculptress mode is super cool, but I don't use it too often. Dynamesh tends to work just fine for me.
Should be not just to prevent death, but also to improve the quality of life.
I do have a Discord, but my Discord is just specifically for people in the Appeal Academy or people that joined my Patreon. At least for now. All right, let's make these eye cavities. You know, I could make the eye cavity deeper, or another idea I had was just paint them, fill them black to kind of give that illusion, which is definitely a viable strategy. I might just do that. Let me make them a little deeper first and then decide. Like I said earlier, it's all about the illusion of depth. All right, that looks pretty good. Quick selection. All right, and now I'm going to merge these two. And one thing that's really important to note here about the jaw, that a lot of people, I don't think, who don't understand what's going on underneath the surface, when they're opening a character's mouth and drawing it, you know, they do one of these. Ba, ba, ba. Ha, ha, ha. That's not how the mouth articulates. The mouth rotates from the joint back here and opens like so. And what that does is when your mouth is open, your chin isn't just going straight down, your chin is going down and backward at an angle down to here, which is really important when you're drawing a character from the front view and you can like see into the mouth because it's angled down, right? Or from the side view when you have the jaw angle changing and it's not just like pulling straight down. That's not how it works. And that just kind of looks awkward. And you might be looking at it. There's so many things, and I bring this one up specifically because it's one of those things that you can look at and not understand why it's wrong, but know internally that something looks off. And that's true with a lot of things. And when you have that feeling, I would say trust your gut. And, you know, you might not know what's going on there. Maybe ask some of your peers. If you have some artist friends or other people, and, you know, see if you can get to the root of what's going on there. Or, you know, ask a pro. Just try to find out, where is the gap? Where's the gap in that knowledge? All right. To push on this a little more, I'd probably have to rest my eyes for a few minutes. So what I'm going to do here is merge these together into a single piece like that. And then we'll take a moment to do some questions. Make sure I didn't miss anything in chat real quick. All right, guys. Let's now take a look at our skull since I've taken a moment to say some words. And let's see if we can do anything here. Are there any big changes I want to make? I actually don't think it looks too bad proportionally. I'm pretty happy with it, but I think I could do a couple little things here and there. Play around with a few different shapes. Maybe widen out that jaw. maybe start to taper in on that skull, the back side of the skull especially. I'm noticing how mine's sticking out a little too far. I talked about widening out that skull towards the back, but in that middle section here, it's kind of looking a little ovoid or oval shaped. So that's kind of looking a little weird. So let's like push that in. Zygomatic, this little bone here, zygomatic process coming through here. Whoop. That guy, he's sticking out a little far. Feeling a little odd. So we'll adjust him. And I probably won't do much more in terms of sculpting on this guy, other than using my move brush and pushing and pulling some things around. Whoops. I say, as I grab my trim brush. I just wanted to fill in some of the gaps here. Alright, and then I'm just going to give this a little schmattering. Very technical sculpting word there, schmattering of texture. And check this out. We're going to go up to surface, down to surface, I should say, noise. Zoom in on that. A little hard to see down here. Increase that strength. Somewhere around there. Make it a little bigger. We'll click on OK. And that is just strong enough. Then we're going to go to clay polish. And if I can, I'm going to set this to -1 and this to 1, which will just help flatten my surface out there. And there we go. We got a little schmattering, as I said. Very technical term, schmattering of texture. And if you want, you can go back over top of that with your clay brush or whatever, smooth, you know, hit it up with whatever. I'll do that here just because it's a little strong in a few areas and I can get some of that kind of bony skeletal feel back by doing this. And while I do this, I'll hang out and answer some more questions. Crunching for the ECTs. ECTs, I assume that is some kind of test for college, if I had to guess. Like an ACT? Is it similar? And you'll notice here that I'm kind of varying my brush size as well in a few areas. And I'm stroking with the direction of my surface as well. Some randomness, but for the most part, flow with the form. Sculpt with the form, people. Yochito, welcome. Yeah, it sounds like, you know, you're in a stressful time if you got some tests coming up, and I totally understand that feeling. But that time will pass, and you will be in a stage where you no longer have to worry about your ECTs, and that'll be over with. Things will be a little more chill, or you'll have something else to worry about. There's always another mountain to climb. Gotcha. Well, hey, if it's not something that you can control more than what you've already done, there's no use worrying about it. It's kind of my life motto. If it's not something you can control, like, why worry about it essentially twice as much on an outcome that you don't get to control? Like, if you've done all the prep work that you can, like a job interview or something, like, don't stress out over whether or not you're gonna get the job. Like, either you will or you won't. And, like, if you don't, there'll be something else. Don't worry about it. Like, no need to like spend mental energy worrying about something that may or may not happen. If it doesn't happen and you want to like, you know, you totally feel free to like be upset about that. I think that's really healthy. But worrying about it before you know you get the result, that's like, you're not doing yourself any favors there. That's just no bueno. Like, I recently got married. Very recently. A couple weeks ago. And it's an outdoor wedding. And we were really kind of worried about whether or not it was going to rain or not. Because it was calling for rain. Like, it was going to storm all day. And we decided that, you know, there's no use. Like, either it's going to rain and the wedding's going to be fine. It'll be okay, you know. Yes, we paid all this money to have it as an outdoor wedding and all this stuff and spent a ton of time preparing things, but like, we can't control the weather. Either it's going to happen or it's not, and there's no use worrying about it. And in that case, it ended up fine. It ended up not raining, and things were beautiful. We had the outdoor wedding that we wanted. It was great. But, you know, if it had gone the other way, we had already determined that, you know, we weren't going to, you know, of course we can be upset about that, but there was no use worrying about it before it happened, just because there was nothing we could really do about that. We couldn't control it. All right. I'm really happy with that quick level of texture. Really simplistic. Like I said, if anything, I could paint in the eye cavity, the nose cavity, and maybe even like behind the mouth to like black it out so that you can't really see in there. But I'm actually fine with that. Like, if we did a little BPR on that, it'd probably do it already. Start getting some of that dark shadow in there. So pretty cool. All right. I say from here we take a little moment, make sure we didn't miss anything in chat, and then probably move on to our next demo where we're going to work on some hands.